Hi, this is Dick Dinman, and please don't touch that dial because part 3 of my DVD Classics Corner on the Air salute to the incredible Universal Classic Monsters Essential Blu-ray Collection continues as I salute the legendary horror star Boris Karloff with my distinguished guest, Sara Karloff. WMPG, Gorham, Portland. Hi, Golden Age film fanatics, and welcome to DVD Classics Corner on the Air. My name is Dick Dinman, and our goal is to become your exclusive guide to the very best of the Golden Age classics coming out on DVD. We'll have reviews, breaking news of upcoming releases, plenty of surprise guests, and a special feature devoted to the great Golden Age film composers, which we call Cinemusic. So let's turn on the marquee and lights, camera, action. It's time for Dick's Picks, in which I get to shine the spotlight on one of my Dick's Picks of the week. For the first time ever, 8 of the most iconic cinematic masterpieces of the horror genre are available together on Blu-ray as Universal Classic Monsters, the Essential Collection, brings together the very best of Universal's legendary monsters. Imaginative and technically groundbreaking tales of terror that launched a uniquely American movie genre. This definitive collection features 8 films, including the original Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, The Invisible Man, The Bride of Frankenstein, The Wolf Man, The Phantom of the Opera, Technicolor remake, and the original 3D incarnation of The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Not since the beginning of time has man known such terror.
No.
Ah! Creature from the Black Lagoon. Startling beyond belief in the screen's first underwater 3D thrill. See underwater thrills never photographed before in this most terrifying of all science fiction adventures. Creature from the Black Lagoon. Astounding in 3 dimensions.
Plus a collectible 48-page book, original posters, correspondence, documentaries, filmmaker commentaries, interviews, storyboards, photo galleries, trailers, and so much more. Universal Classic Monsters, the Essential Collection, will make your skin crawl, but in a good way. Courtesy of horror icons Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, Lon Chaney Jr., and Claude Rains. And it's available now from Universal Studios Home Entertainment, even as we speak. Stay tuned for more Dick's Picks, coming up on DVD Classics Corner on the Air very soon.
What's it all about? Everybody's dead. I feel like a dinosaur. Oh, I know how people think of me these days. Old-fashioned, outmoded. You can't change a whole lifetime with one picture. Oh, Sammy, what's the use? Mr. Boogeyman, King of Blood, they used to call me. Marx Brothers make you laugh. Garbo makes you weep. Orlock makes you scream. And once I thought I'd be an actor. Oh, it's not that the films are bad. I've got bad. I couldn't even play a straight part decently anymore. I've been doing the other thing too long. And even that isn't the point. You know what they call my films today? Camp. High camp. My kind of horror isn't horror anymore. No one's afraid of a painted monster.
And that, of course, is the unmistakable voice of the one and only Boris Karloff. And no, he isn't really talking about himself. That's just a scene from his final U.S. film, Targets. And today, to commemorate the Blu-ray release of Universal Classic Monsters, the Essential Collection, which contains 8 classic horror films, including 3 of Mr. Karloff's, Frankenstein, The Mummy, and Bride of Frankenstein, it's my great pleasure to pay tribute to one of the silver screen's most distinguished actors, and what a thrill it is to play host to none other than Boris Karloff's talented daughter Sara, who through the years has been instrumental in keeping the brilliant legacy of her iconic father alive.
Have you seen Targets?
Well, I was going to bring that up because Targets is my very favorite Karloff
Mine
performance. Too. Yours too.
Mine too. Yeah. It's a timeless film.
Let me interject and tell our audience, Targets was Boris Karloff's last domestic performance, and it was Peter Bogdanovich's very first film, and it's about a young man who embarks on a spree of killing, and Boris Karloff stars as Byron Orlock, which is really a thinly disguised version of himself, and he gets to reveal so many facets of his personality that I don't believe to that extent he had the chance to reveal through all of the hundreds of films he did before. Am I right?
That's correct.
How close is that to the real Boris Karloff?
Oh, a lot of it. It conveyed what my father felt, and to a great degree, and that is that the real horror continues to happen on the streets, not up on the screen. And that was the message of the film. And you have to face it face to face. And that he was a truly good and gentle man who did not take himself seriously.
And the humor is also at times very visible in this performance. It has everything.
Oh, yes.
Vulnerability, humor.
And Peter was an absolute genius in creating this vehicle to use my father's time.
And from what I hear, Roger Corman said to Peter Bogdanovich, Boris Karloff owes us 2 days. See if you can build a film around those 2 days. Is that true?
Yes.
Huh.
Yes. And it took more than 2 days, and my father donated the balance of his time because he admired Peter so much.
It would be difficult for me to think of a more perfect last major film for...
Oh, I know. And when my father does that soliloquy in the film, he did it in one take, and the entire cast and crew stood up and applauded. And that brought tears to my father's eyes.
Huh.
It meant so much to him to have his peers give him such an accolade at that point in his career. He didn't talk about his work.
He was not one to...
No, he really didn't. And he didn't complain. He just loved working, as exhibited by some of the perfectly awful films he did for American International. I mean, some of his last films were perfectly awful, but he loved working.
Well, yes, but some of the American International films, like Comedy of Terrors and The Raven...
Oh, well, those were wonderful.
I think they're wonderful.
Those old men had such a great time spoofing their own boogeyman images.
Now, is this true? Is this true? Because this is, again, maybe publicity. During The Raven, supposedly... Peter Lorre was elevated high above the stage in, I think, bird costume or something. And when the director called lunch, your dad...
They left him there.
They left? So it's true?
Yeah. I mean, they played horrible practical jokes on one another.
Like what?
Well, in the Comedy of Terrors, when they put... was it Basil or Vincent in the vat
Yeah.
and sat on it, they left him there. I mean, they were terrible to one another in all good form, but and affection. But they were having such a good time. They drove Roger Corman crazy, and they enjoyed doing that.
Again, it just shows your dad's terrific sense of humor, and of course,
And Vincent's.
Vincent's, and probably Basil Rathbone's too.
Oh, absolutely.
We pause now for station identification.
DVD Classics Corner on the Air is proud to be a presentation of Southern Maine's own WMPG FM 90.9 and 104.1 on your dial.
Some of his Mexican films at the end were just appalling.
Were they? I've never.
But
I have
he
to.
loved working.
I've never seen them. I've never seen
Well,
them.
nor have I. But
Really?
No, I don't like scary movies.
You're kidding.
No. It's terrible casting me as my father's daughter.
Now, speaking of that, what were your experiences as Boris Karloff's daughter? Were you in life typecast to a certain extent? Were there any examples of...
People always have expectations.
Like what?
Well, that you're going to be a spoiled brat, or that you're going to be standoffish, or whatever, But I was raised in San Francisco, so I led a relatively normal life, attending a girls' private school. So I escaped most of the stereotype Hollywood brat syndrome.
Mm-hmm. And how was your dad as a father?
He was attentive. He was a good listener. He was fair. All the things that one would expect of a man of his character.
Any experiences you can think of when, let's say, you were out with your father and some fan collared him or acted inappropriately?
My father was wonderful with his fans and appreciative of his fans, but interesting occasion would be riding on an elevator with him, for instance. People never knew whether or not to take advantage of the captive situation, and there was always a lot of interesting body language going on in the elevator, nudging and elbowing and shifting around and, saying, oh, look, there's Boris Karloff, And when we would step out of an elevator, if one was to turn around quickly, people would be pointing and a lot more outspoken in saying, there's Boris Karloff. That was Boris. Did you see that? That was Boris Karloff. But by and large, people minded their manners because he had the reputation of being a gentleman. But if someone spoke to him, he always was the perfect gentleman and always said thank you. And his fans were always polite to him. He dressed always like an English gentleman, and he was treated accordingly.
And during his last years, I understand he actually returned to England.
The last 10 years of his life, yes.
Mm-hmm. I must mention some of his great stage performances in addition to Arsenic and Old Lace. He played Captain Hook opposite Jean Arthur in Peter Pan. How I wished I would have been around to see that.
Oh, it was marvelous.
Did you see it?
I got to see it, and I got to fly across the stage and be sprinkled with fairy dust. And my father arranged for me to see it from the wings and backstage and out front. And and I visited him for a week and saw it. And at the end of my visit, he said, "Well, I don't think you're ever going to be an actress. I don't think you had the fire in the belly. You paid more attention to Nana the dog than you did to me."
And I also should mention that he was nominated for a Tony for The Lark opposite Julie Harris.
Yes, and he adored working with Julie, just adored it. And he just adored her, and she him.
We know now that you and I agree on what our favorite performance is on film targets. Of anything he's ever done, or he'd ever done, what do you think would be his, if he had to just pick one, his all-time favorite acting experience?
You know, I think obviously Frankenstein, for the pivotal difference it made in his life, both personally and professionally. You know, he'd been around a long time in the business and nobody knew it but him. I think his experiences with Val Lewton were very professionally and personally rewarding. He liked and admired Val Lewton, loved making those films because of their quality and because of the professionalism of working with Val Lewton, and because of the acting he was able to exhibit, the difference in performance type that he was able to give to those films. I think he really enjoyed doing the comedic spoofing of his own boogeyman image in the Raven and a Comedy of Terrors. I know how much he enjoyed working with Jack Pearson, how much he admired his genius as a makeup man. So I think at different times, for different reasons in his career, he enjoyed immensely doing certain films. I know, as any actor, he enjoyed the instant gratification of stage work, although I know he told me that he never failed to suffer from stage fright each night as he stepped onto the stage until he got into his lines. Every single night he would have stage fright. I think that keeps one at the top of his game. I think anybody who just walks through a performance is not giving it his all, and if anything, my father gave his all to every performance, film, radio, stage, television. I think he enjoyed the challenge of television. In 1949, he moved to New York to embrace the new medium of television. Very few film stars did that because they were used to multiple takes, and the medium of live television was frightening. My father took it as a challenge and met it head on, and ultimately had 3 series of his own, starred on all the major shows of the day. Really had an opportunity to do some comedy, do some drama, and host some shows, and he did a huge body of television work, huge body of radio work, recorded children's albums, which he loved doing, and again, the different manner he could adopt with his voice came through with his Rudyard Kipling recordings, his Hans Christian Andersen,
and Dr. Seuss's don't forget How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
And then, of course, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, for which he won a Grammy. And he not only narrated, but he was the voice of the Grinch. And so he had a very broad-based career, and to pick a favorite, I don't know that he could. I think there were things that he loved doing when he was doing them, but overall he was simply passionate about his profession. But I know the thing of which he probably was the most proud was the time he quietly and modestly was one of the founding members of the Screen Actors Guild, and his card number was number 9. Those members were putting their their careers on the line. The formation of a union against the studio bosses and tyrannical directors to give a voice to those actors who had not yet reached a point in their careers where they had a voice to speak out for themselves. Those founding members had experienced being treated like a piece of meat by the studios, and they were passionate about protecting the rights of actors and better working conditions, better pay, better hours. And I know how important that was to my father. My mother told me that they would go to parties and dance by one another on the dance floor and say, meeting Tuesday night at so-and-so's house, and dance on by. I mean, it was really hush-hush, but, it was really treacherous for those actors who were involved in that as founding members. And my father received a gold card for that work, and he served on the board of directors for years and years, very quietly, never talked about it, but he made a huge contribution to his profession as he felt was his obligation.
And conditions prior to the establishment of Screen Actors Guild were literally appalling. And the formation of that union gradually was able to correct all of the terrible ways that actors were treated.
One day, my father worked for 25 hours. One day and a bit. One day, 19 hours in makeup. And, it was appalling. Think about losing 25 pounds while making one film. Think about working 25 hours. I mean, it was awful. 4 hours every morning to put on the Frankenstein makeup and 3 hours every night to take it off. That's before you went to work.
7 hours in makeup.
That's
in and out.
Yeah. That's not before the cameras.
Oh, I know.
So it was, he'd paid his dues long before he got that role. And then the role that made him an overnight success after 20 years jolly well took its toll on him, and he never complained once. He was often asked if he minded being typecast, and he said, any actor who can establish a niche or a trademark, any person, no matter what his job or profession, who can establish a trademark or a niche and be recognized for it, and for which he will be able to continue working and earning his bread and butter, has nothing to complain about, would be very ungrateful if he complained. No, he said, I'm jolly lucky.
And he had a tremendous sense of humor about himself, to the point where spoofing himself was no problem. If you take a look at Abbott and Costello, meet the killer, Boris Karloff, and Abbott and Costello meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, he apparently just loved spoofing himself. Didn't take himself seriously.
Well, he didn't take himself seriously. He always said, a plumber probably couldn't act, and I couldn't fix a sink. A shoemaker should stick to his last, and I should stick to acting. He said, I can't mend shoes. So he was truly self-effacing and modest and humble and grateful. Remarkable combination for an icon. My father was probably the only person, other than perhaps a president, who has been honored on 3 U.S. postage commemorative stamps. He was honored on 2 stamps in 1997, along with Lon Chaney Sr. and Jr. and Bela Lugosi, and then again he was honored in 2003, I think it was, in a series of 10 stamps which celebrated the 10 different disciplines of filmmaking, such as directing, costume, screenwriting, etc., and makeup. And it showed the hands of Jack Pierce making my father up as Frankenstein, and of course it was my father's face on the stamp is Frankenstein. So he's been honored on 3 U.S. postage stamps, and that's a huge honor. And the post office was superb to work with. And the stamps were very successful and popular with the public, and it was a great family honor.
Well, and guess what? I've saved them all. I have.
Oh, good for you.
Yes, I have them. And
Good.
And they're not.
So do I.
they're not leaving the premises, believe me.
That was a wonderful experience both times,
Right.
and a great honor.
Any final words about Boris Karloff and his legacy?
Well, I want to thank the fans of my father, because it is they who have perpetuated his legacy and have done so with such respect and warmth. And every time I am asked to make an appearance and I have an opportunity to meet my father's fans, and every time I receive an email from my father's fans, I am just so gratified by the experience, because they get it. They understand my father as a person, and they appreciate the passion he had for his profession, and they help me protect his remarkable legacy, and they certainly are responsible for perpetuating it. And I am forever in the debt of my father's fans.
Anywhere you look, everywhere you look, his films are being constantly run to new fans, and it's a continuing cycle. And he is truly one of the greats of cinema. And Sara, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us, because to me and to all of us, it has been just a terrific experience.
Well, it has been for me also, and you've made it very comfortable, and it's always a pleasure to talk about my father. He was a lovely human being. You did a beautiful interview. Thank you.
And again, I'm honored that you took the time, and I can't wait to have you back on the show. And thanks so much again.
Oh, well, thank you. You are a delightful interviewer. Just delightful. It's a conversation, not an interview.
That's the way I feel.
That's a real talent.
Well, you're as good as your guest, believe me.
Well, not always.
Well, that's my show for today. DVD Classics Corner on the Air is conceived, written, produced, and directed by me, Double D. And if you missed any part of this show, or if you'd like to hear some of my other latest shows, just go to the archives section at www.wmpg.org. And if you'd like to hear some of my older vintage shows, please go to www.dvdclassicscorner.net, where in addition to the broadcasts, you'll find hundreds of my print reviews of classic DVD releases. So, until next week on WMPG,
keep well, keep happy, and keep listening.